For all these past years, Ukraine has not concealed its intention to reacquire nuclear weapons. I'd like to remind you that just days before the special military operation began in February 2022, Ukrainian President Zelensky, speaking from the Munich conference podium, explicitly stated that the Ukrainian authorities had such an intention. But if we take a slightly deeper look into history, I would like to remind you that the whole issue of nuclear weapons in Ukraine actually began with a specific resolution, with a declaration of the Supreme Council of what was then known as the Ukrainian SSR on the 16th of July in the year 1990, where the fundamental principles were officially proclaimed upon which the future independent Ukrainian statehood would be constructed. And one of the three fundamental principles enshrined in this declaration is Ukraine's non-nuclear status. Subsequently, it was similarly enshrined in the Constitution of Ukraine. Extremely disturbing information has been released today by the Foreign Intelligence Service. There is absolutely no doubt that it is reliable. There is no doubt whatsoever that Great Britain and France, as nuclear powers who, in theory, bear a special responsibility for maintaining global stability and for the resolution of conflicts, are in fact currently the primary sponsors of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Moreover, they are prepared to escalate it into the realm of a nuclear conflict. There is also no doubt whatsoever that they are operating, on the one hand, completely detached and isolated from those democratic institutions which currently exist in their respective countries, but in very close collusion both among themselves and with the current authorities of Ukraine. It seems there's even an understanding, apparently, that in the future, Ukraine's acquisition of nuclear weapons was to be presented as its own indigenous Ukrainian development. However, beyond any shadow of a doubt, Ukrainians inherently possess no capacity for independent development without external assistance. For all these past years, Ukraine has not concealed its intention to reacquire nuclear weapons. I'd like to remind you that just days before the special military operation began in February 2022, Ukrainian President Zelensky, speaking from the Munich conference podium, explicitly stated that the Ukrainian authorities had such an intention. But if we take a slightly deeper look into history, I would like to remind you that the whole issue of nuclear weapons in Ukraine actually began with a specific resolution, with a declaration of the Supreme Council of what was then known as the Ukrainian SSR on the 16th of July in the year 1990, where the fundamental principles were officially proclaimed upon which the future independent Ukrainian statehood would be constructed. And one of the three fundamental principles enshrined in this declaration is Ukraine's non-nuclear status. Subsequently, it was similarly enshrined in the Constitution of Ukraine. And it was precisely on this basis that we recognized Ukraine's independence and sovereignty as a separate state, and subsequently entered into agreements, including the well-known Budapest Memorandum. So, what is currently taking place must of course become the subject of the broadest international discussion within those specific structures that are officially authorized to oversee the non-proliferation regime, including the United Nations Security Council and the IAEA, and the Special Conference on the Observance of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. By the way, the next 5-year review conference will be held no later than the end of April this year. The time has come to discuss this there as well. But without a doubt, this extremely alarming situation must also be discussed at the national level. And therefore we, the senators of the Russian Federation, have appealed. Our appeal is already, as they say, being sent through diplomatic channels to the addressees. We have appealed to our colleagues in the parliaments of Great Britain and France with a call to immediately initiate appropriate parliamentary investigations already within these states, because I'm quite sure no one consulted with their parliaments and no one discussed this issue with the political forces of the respective nations. This is what one might call a top-level conspiracy, hatched with the expectation that it would simply go through and that later all of this would be presented as a genuinely Ukrainian initiative, but it will not pass. There is absolutely no doubt that either our parliamentary colleagues in these countries, and we sincerely hope in the European Parliament as well, will fully grasp their responsibility for what is unfolding and recognize all the grave dangers that this particular conspiracy truly poses. We are well aware that various conspiracies have taken place there among them in Europe, but this specific conspiracy is far more egregious than some others. And they will find within themselves, if you so wish, the courage, the political courage, to at the very least pose some serious questions to their leaders, and at the very most, to call them to account for their decisions. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Ukraine, as a participant in the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, bears precisely the same obligations under this international agreement, just like the nuclear powers themselves. Only nuclear powers, under the treaty, there are Articles 1, 2, 3, and 6, which very clearly and precisely stipulate that nuclear weapon states, firstly, shall not transfer nuclear weapons to non-nuclear weapon states, and secondly, non-nuclear weapon states shall not accept such weapons even when they are offered to them. So on the one hand, there are the obligations of France and Great Britain, and on the other, there are the obligations of Ukraine as a full participant in the non-proliferation treaty, and any deviation from these commitments naturally would constitute a fundamental breach of the treaty, and in this case, Ukraine would once again find itself an international outcast, radically violating its obligations. There is no doubt whatsoever that these leaders have long since discredited themselves through their unreserved support for Ukraine in this conflict and their infamous slogan, "War to the last Ukrainian," as well as by undermining all attempts at a negotiation process on the Ukrainian front. There's nothing new here, as they say, but nuclear weapons are, if you will, an additional chapter, an additional section in this list of violations that the leaders of the respective states commit, I'll emphasize again, without going through democratic procedures, which they are so proud of and which they try to teach the whole world. Through our direct appeal to parliamentarians, our colleagues in the UK and France, we still hope that, if you will, some professional sense will be stirred in them when they realize that without their consent, attempts are being made to drag their countries, their peoples, their own voters into a completely irresponsible venture. Perhaps then they will finally awaken to a clear understanding of their own responsibility and the resolve to first meticulously dissect situations of this nature and second somehow guarantee their non-recurrence in the future.
Times of India videos, your daily dose of India and the world. Global news, different views, and sharp analysis.
Pressure of expectation from your fans, your supporters.
That has often served as a backdrop for several Bollywood.
You're not a brute majority anymore. If you individually take out Tera.
Making sense of global conflicts. Tracking the new emerging world order.
Strike on Israeli military bases.
A multi-pronged.
To stay out of harm's way as Israel started bombing targets across.
Understanding changing alliances in a polarized world. Tune into TOI videos for all this and more. Click on the bell icon to subscribe and never miss an update.